Colleagues, welcome to the closing session of the 2021 International Summit on the Teaching Profession. Learning from the past, looking to the future, excellence and equity for all. Delegates, those who have been observing proceedings and now members of the public who, many of whom were with us in the opening session, have rejoined us for this final closing session, which includes a look forward as well as a reflection upon this convening in 2021 with our primary host, the US, supported of course by OECD and EI. Colleagues, we have a number of closing remarks from our hosts. I want to turn first to David Edwards, General Secretary of Education International. David?
Thanks, Tony. First, let me thank Secretary Cardona and his team in the Department of Education who worked tirelessly in organizing this ISTP. Both Randy and Becky said it, but please allow me to reiterate how critically important it is that you have brought the US back to the table with a full and committed delegation to learn from and with others who are also entrusted with an equally massive responsibility and at an incredibly critical moment. I also wish to thank my presidents, Susan Hopgood, John Bangs as well, and Andreas, and our OECD colleagues for their decade-long commitment to this journey of co-constructing and sustaining an informed dialogue, and obviously you, Tony, for a decade of moderation in every sense of the word, and the prolific Linda for your valuable insights. Intentional collaboration and institutionalized dialogue reflect cultural, organizational, and structural commitments. The education systems that have them reopened more quickly and will undoubtedly recover and transform more deeply. Being well and doing well are inextricably linked. Andreas mentioned 4 policy levers that are supported by evidence: student learning and student well-being, teacher support and student well-being, teacher well-being and teacher support, teacher well-being, and a collaborative culture. What I heard in the discussions that followed is that we indeed need to pull several levers in order to create the right conditions. Balancing the weight, direction, and timing of each lever requires great skill, but even greater trust. Trust is the fulcrum for uplifting relationships. And if, as Linda reminded us, relationships are the antidote to trauma, and we know that this pandemic period has been traumatic for children, teachers, and communities, then we must create the conditions, find the time, and match the resources to policies and programs that depart from that knowledge. We must restructure relationships with equity in mind. And I think Andreas nailed it in the opening. We need to stop commodifying education. Students are not clients. Teachers are not service providers. A strong relationship between governments and teachers' unions is critical to building back better. We've also reached massive consensus on the whole child approach and the need for comprehensive support for teachers. I don't think we've ever come to such a consensus on priorities before. We've rediscovered just how valuable our school communities are, and we cannot afford to unlearn that lesson. But as Susan reminded us at the beginning, equity is useless if it remains merely an aspiration. Practical policies are needed, which requires initiation, implementation, and evaluation. Above all, a joint determination to make them work. We need a growth mindset ourselves in our ability to imagine an education system that enables communities and the planet to thrive. Many of you know about our Teach for the Planet campaign and the partnering EI, OECD, Earth Day, UNESCO, Global Students Forum are doing via our climate education initiatives. But I would be remiss a week before COP26 in Glasgow in not connecting our student and teachers' well-being to the well-being of humanity itself. We will be there releasing our climate education ambition report cards there. And I know that the UK Education Secretary has invited all the ministers present here to a special convening with your environmental minister counterparts to ensure that education is part of your country's COP commitment. Complacency is not an option. To close, let me return to what Secretary Cardona said, that teachers need more than appreciation. They need to be empowered, and they need to be supported and the organizations that they elect to represent them need to be at the table. Over this period, we have witnessed teachers prepare student engagement strategies for multiple contingencies and via modalities for in-person instruction, asynchronous at-home instruction, and everything in between, oftentimes not knowing until the day they wake up what governments have decided. Teachers' unions have been repeatedly warning that the intensification of workload coupled with the burdensome and low-trust compliancy approaches was an unsustainable problem, and that teacher well-being was impacting student well-being. This realization is now obvious, visible, and a growing priority across the many country commitments we have heard from today. There has never been a greater opportunity for us to actually begin to fulfill our commitments than we have today. Intentional collaboration is no longer one of the options. It must be our path. And we look forward to continuing the journey and seeing you all next year in España. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. EI, together with OECD, a partnership that has taken us through a decade of convenings of the International Summit on the Teaching Profession, and we are delighted that we will now have some remarks from Matthias Cormann, Secretary General of OECD.
Secretary Cardona, ministers, union leaders, distinguished guests. This year marks two special anniversaries. Just 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of the OECD, and now we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the International Summit on the Teaching Profession. The International Summit on the Teaching Profession is a truly unique forum in the world of education. It brings together ministers and union leaders from around the world to share experiences and make national commitments to implement better education policies for their citizens. These commitments have evolved considerably over the years, demonstrating how much the depth of the dialogue between governments and unions has advanced since the first summit in New York. However, ISTP has never lost its ability to make some of the most challenging issues become resolvable by looking at the bigger picture of how they are addressed elsewhere. Such comparative exchanges of knowledge and best practices are precisely the bread and butter for the OECD. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed and amplified the many inadequacies and inequities in our education systems. Already before the pandemic, the quarter of the most disadvantaged students lagged on average across countries over 4 years behind their most privileged peers, according to our PISA assessments. At the OECD, we worked closely with our members and partners to ensure continued access to education when schools were closed and to reopen schools safely. The pandemic has also further accelerated what was already a rapid pace of digital transformation. Our school systems were invented in the industrial age, when the prevailing norms were standardization and compliance, and when it was both effective and efficient to educate students in batches and train teachers once for their entire working lives. This industrial approach to schooling makes change in a fast-moving world far too slow, and the changes in our societies have vastly outpaced the structural capacity of our existing school systems to respond. What we used to teach has become easy to digitize and automate. Our education systems now need to go beyond treating students uniformly to ensure no one is left behind and that everyone is offered the best possible opportunity to participate and benefit in the digital economy. There are a few ways to help address this. First, by building on the expertise of teachers and school leaders and enlisting them in the design of better policies and better practices. Second, we need carefully crafted enabling environments that can unleash teachers and schools' ingenuity and build capacity for change. And finally, we need leaders who are willing to seize the opportunities while better managing the risks and challenges associated with the digital transformation. This means tackling institutional structures that reinforce outdated learning habits rather than supporting learners. It also means being sincere about social change, imaginative in policy making, and capable of using the trust leaders earn to deliver effective reforms while supporting people. I know this is a tall order for the ISTP, but it is what we owe to our next generation. Our schools today will be our economy and society tomorrow. By creating a more level playing field for people to acquire the skills that power better jobs and better lives, education can and will deliver greater social mobility, more equitable opportunities, and stronger societies. This is not about making the impossible possible, but about making the possible attainable. It is within our means to deliver a future, a better future, for millions of learners who currently do not have one. Count on the OECD to make headway, or to help make you a headway with this agenda. And I look forward to seeing the progress when we meet next year in Valencia. Thank you.
Fantastic message. And I know I also speak on behalf of all of us that OECD support and guidance for ISTP has been crucial. And Andreas Schleicher, can we also acknowledge that that leadership that you have provided has been such a significant factor with EI? Thank you very much. Miguel Cardona, can I say on behalf of all of us that it's been wonderful to be back in the US. And I have to tell you, it feels like we have been because of the way in which the US has hosted this summit. Been a brilliant planning team, fantastic combined effort. And we just want to acknowledge your leadership and the way in which we've been able to come together and feel a real sense of collective endeavour. It's been very much the spirit that you have brought to the leadership of this summit. We thank you. And over to you for final comments, Secretary of Education.
Thank you. And I want to thank the team that's in the room right here who's worked really hard to make this happen. Thank you to everyone in the room. I want to thank them publicly. The past 3 days have been an engaging experience as I've listened and learned alongside all of you. From Canada, America's closest neighbor to the north, to our Asian colleagues in Singapore and China, to our many friends in Europe. It's been a privilege to sit at this virtual table with all of you and our international co-hosts at Education International and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. With our close partners at the American Federation of Teachers, the Council of Chief State School Officers, and the National Education Association, the delegation from the United States has been able to roll up our sleeves and work together here in Washington, D.C. We are all on the same team. We've had a productive time together. Across the countries we represent, some of our educational systems are quite large and others are more compact. Some make more decisions at the national level and others are more decentralized. Education financing varies across our nation. But as we've seen, our common challenges outweigh our differences as we come together to learn and problem solve. This is the power and the promise of the International Summit on the Teaching Profession. We are at a real crossroads, at a decisive moment worldwide, when we must reimagine the future of education and provide all children, with the opportunity to grow and to thrive. As we've discussed over the past few days, we cannot squander this moment by going back to the education systems we had before the pandemic. The pandemic has made inequities for students, for families, educators, and communities starkly visible, and in many cases, exacerbated them. We truly need to build back better with a focus on the whole child and every student's well-being. And we must also focus on our educators' well-being. For me, one of the biggest takeaways from the last few days is the importance of intentional collaboration at all levels of the education system and with other key agencies that support student, family, and teacher well-being. We know, for example, that the pandemic reinforced how crucial health and nutrition are in supporting students' learning and growth. Without deep, deliberate collaboration with all relevant partners, we will not be able to ensure educational equity, and student success. Andreas Schleicher's presentation illuminated this point. He showed that high-performance education systems with strong frontline capacity and resilience were much better at operations even in severe disruptions caused by the pandemic. And the quality of relationship between governments and teacher unions played a central part in this. I'm proud that the discussions over the last couple of days have centered on supporting student and educator well-being and advancing educational equity. Like all of you, the U.S. delegation has committed to working together in several key areas over the coming months and years. Listening to all of you has helped us hone our ISTP commitments. And as we discussed in the previous session, the U.S. is committed to doing three things. First, we will build and sustain structures and systems that promote and enhance intentional collaboration at all levels of education and across relevant agencies to foster student success. We know that none of us can do this vital work of elevating the teaching profession or supporting our educators alone. Second, we will promote and support schools as hubs of the community with inclusive, safe, and welcoming environments in which all students, families, and educators thrive, collaborate, create, and excel. Our schools are more than simply places to learn. They are centers of promise and potential. Third, we will improve systems and supports that value and elevate educators as respected professionals. We understand that to do this work, we must actively support, recruit, and retain excellent educators and diversify our teaching profession. We serve children. We are all stronger when we collaborate and work together. I am personally invigorated by the conversations we've had over the last few days, and I know we must do everything we can to support our educators and to further excellence and equity for all students. Let's seize the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That is a fantastic way to bring to a close with just one final message, this ISTP 21. David Edwards said that we'll be convening in Spain. Well, there's going to be an invitation that you're about to receive. Going forward between now and then, we will have a report, an account of this convening. We'll have commitments that people will move on within jurisdictions, and I know also bilateral and multilateral collaboration will be taking place as we gather again in 2022. Colleagues, you're about to receive that invitation as our final part of the 2021 convening. So enjoy this invitation.
Dear colleagues, I am very happy to announce that Spain will host the next International Summit of the Teaching Profession in Valencia. The main time on the summit will be moving forward after the pandemic, governments and teacher unions working together to leaving no one behind. En concreto, del 11 al 13 de mayo del año que viene, tenemos la intención de discutir cómo podemos aprovechar el potencial de las tecnologías digitales en la educación, cómo los maestros y las comunidades escolares y los responsables políticos pueden trabajar juntos para diseñar e implementar políticas educativas para restaurar y mejorar la educación después de la pandemia. El papel de los profesores y de toda la comunidad educativa para garantizar un futuro sostenible. Como sabéis, la cumbre del año 2022 será un foro único para discutir e intercambiar puntos de vista sobre el desarrollo de las políticas efectivas para la profesión docente. Con suerte, esta será la primera cumbre internacional de la profesión docente presencial que se llevará a cabo desde la pandemia. Brindará una oportunidad incomparable para que los ministros de Educación y los líderes sindicales exploren en profundidad cómo la profesión docente puede mejorar las oportunidades educativas para todos los niños, los jóvenes, durante el periodo de recuperación de pospandemia. Por todo ello, esperamos ansiosos la celebración de ese evento. See you en Valencia. Thank you very much.
For those who have been delegates, for those who have been observing, for members of the public who have joined us, the message should be pretty clear. This is a remarkable community of educational leaders, and therefore the future of our young people's learning is in fantastic hands. So perhaps we might just finally, in whatever way you think appropriate, appreciate each other as we sign off, and we'll see each other very soon. Thank you to every single person who has participated and contributed to a fantastic convening.